This is Bally Pop strips. They are pre-cut strips. They're 2.5 inches wide by 45 inches. And what they are is different colors that the manufacturer has actually put together for you. And there's 40 strips in one package. So you get an array of colors that are just unbelievable. And this has really sparked all kinds of ideas for me as far as clothing, and there's already quilts made out of these. And so I want to give you some ideas that you can do, both clothing and home dec and accessories today. So first of all, I want to show you the jacket I have on is a reversible jacket, and this one is the same jacket, but I took the strips and I lined them all up, and I actually serged them together, and then the inside is reversible. So this is just 2 layers of cotton actually when you get the strips put together, and then you put the backing on. So you can wear it both ways. This is a reversible jacket, totally reversible. But the neat thing is that it's just a nice weight to just throw on. It's not a heavy jacket, and it's a lot of fun because you can wear it both directions. So let me explain how I put these strips together. Now, some of you have sergers and some of you don't. I'm going to give you ideas for both, so don't panic. But the way that I put these together is actually by the serger with a flat lock. And the flat lock is actually a stitch where you put the wrong sides together. So actually, when I put these 2 pieces together, the wrong side is matched, and then I'm going to set up my serger so that it's 2 threads. This thread right here is the lower looper, and this thread right here is the needle. So that's the only 2 that you're working with. And one thing about doing a 2 thread is that you don't have to worry about balancing more than 2 threads. So the key to a flat lock is that this thread right here, this needle thread, is going to be very loose. So do you see how that just loops very, very loosely right there? And here is the way that you're going to open this. You're going to actually, when you turn this down, it is actually, let me put this stick down, it is actually going to flatten up on its own, and it is going to be flat when it gets opened. Now, do you see what happened? And then you have this, I would say, like a decorative stitch. So there's some accent to this, and it's a fast way to put these strips together, really fast. I only cut off just the edge of the fabric. I didn't cut off a lot. I didn't trim off so I could utilize all of the fabric that I could and not waste anything. And so here I am with all my strips laid together, so you can see how you could contrast the thread, and that way you would have the lines going down the strips, and that's also lots of great vertical lines. That's very very flattering. And so now what I want to do is to be sure, before I get done, I want to be sure that I secure this thread right here. So what I do is I have a double eye needle, and it has an eye on the top and an eye on the bottom, and I just pull that serger thread through there, and then I pull this down, and that secures that thread in between there. You can cut off that other little tiny piece of thread, and then it will close that up, and it will be secure all the way down to how far in you bring the thread. So that's important too, because you're going to come around here and also cut some of this. So you want to have it secure in places where you need it. So if you don't have a serger, of course, you can just put these together strip by strip. So all I did here was I laid the strips, this time right side together, stitched here 1/4 of an inch, and then I came over here, took the next one, stitched 1/4 of an inch, and do you see how I'm building now the same thing that I just built with the serger, although you end up with no lines. And of course, you could do other things. You could put decorative stitch here, or you could just use your imagination and put a little cording there in between each one. Or you could put a little trim over top, or you don't have to have anything on it. Or you can also just top stitch it if you wanted to. So let me show you the back of this jacket so you can see, because one thing about it, if you don't know, there's some sewing police out there. Sometimes they notice that your shoulder doesn't match. If that happens, they won't be able to tell on this one because it ends up to be the yoke at the back will interrupt the shoulder line. Because I'll tell you, the shoulder line, we had a problem with the shoulder line meeting. The only way you can do the shoulder line and meet it exactly is to be able to lay it out, the fronts, and do fronts separately. And the back has to have it's just really, you got to work the center front in order to get the shoulder to work. So in order to get rid of all that, and you know what, for me, it was the mistake. So I said, okay, we're going to just cover that up. So basically, I took this jacket that does not have a yoke, I added a yoke, which makes it look kind of almost like a shirt jacket a little bit. But it's a nice added line. I mean, it actually gives a little more interest to the back. So let's take a look at how I adjusted my pattern. And basically this has no darts. This is just a plain simple pattern. So it's great to do all kinds of embellishment on. So what I did was I took my pattern that is center front fold, and I lay it on a piece of fabric, another piece of paper. I trace around the yoke and I went 3 inches down. Now you may want to decide maybe 4 inches or whatever, but it's best if you take the, try and get the line of the jacket to not be interrupted like a short line and then a wide line and then a narrow, wide, narrow. Try to make it so that it's eye appealing. So wherever I want that, I make that mark. I make the mark on the pattern paper, and I make the mark on the pattern itself. Then I'm going to add the length of the seam allowance. That's very important. And then on this part of the jacket, I will also add the width of the seam allowance above. So that I should have a line there so you can see that. But that would be like 1/4 inch above. I like to do 1/4 inch seam allowances. So it'd be 1/4 above here and 1/4 down below there. And that way you won't lose anything as far as your length in your sleeve. You don't want to mess that up. So be sure and put that on. That's very important. Okay, so then what do? I now have my yoke, my cut yoked piece here. I'm going to take it up to this pattern, that fabric that I've made with the strips, and I'm going to lay this, and I'm going to be sure that my center goes in the middle of one of those strips. It's probably not as appealing to go right down the center of the strip. It's better if you go to the middle of the strip. It's a little more eye appealing. Then what I'm going to do to get the yoke went sideways, right? So here's what I'm going to do with the yoke. I'm going to follow the line of the serging or seam allowance, whatever, and then there's the yoke is going to be on the horizontal. And then I'm going to put my front the same way, and I'm going to make sure that both of the front, one is this way, one is this way, okay? But be sure that you line these up correctly right here. This right here, if you're turning it, needs to line up with that right there, So get your point of reference and be sure that you don't mix that up there, because you could have a problem with that front being off-centered. And then we're going to lay the sleeve the same way. And I got to thinking, here we go with our center line. Again, I would not center that line. I would center the middle of the strip, okay? And you know, you could actually do some fun things. You could maybe do half of it going this way and half of it going this way. Oh, that's another story. Okay. Well, anyway, so I made all that fabric, and what I did was I made sure that I used the width here of the widest part, and then I had strips that followed me that were wide enough for all of this. So I had one whole strip for the back, one whole strip for the front, and then two strips for the sleeve, and actually two for the front. So you need to make those in pieces, and then you lay them out. Instead of making a great big huge piece, then you'll end up trying to work that too much. Don't need all that trouble. So I had a little extra left over, so what do? Well, of course, you make a tote. Why not? So I had a little extra of this way, and I had a little extra of this. And so all I did was just turned up the bottom and made a cute little tote, and it's just real simple, nothing to it. You all know how to do a tote. I showed you before.